The month of Valentine's is upon us, and nothing is more love in the air than going back into Torghast, getting some more powers and timing keys that you have no business timing with 4 players. Welcome back to the bench. Episode 28.
It's not even Torghast.
What was this?
Hold on, there's a big tweet.
What was this attached to if it wasn't Torghast?
While I look for something, Growl, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Excited to be back in our weekly talking about why Mythic Plus is broken and what Blizzard needs to do and what the exploit is this week podcast. The bench.
Yeah,
as I sit here on the hill farming Grom's Blood in Classic because there's nothing to do anymore.
So this is a tweet from Meg.
Holiday buffs.
That says, turns out the worst thing for Mythic Plus seed isn't affixes or depletion, it's holiday buffs. So if you remember, like, what was it? 4 or 5 weeks ago, we had a nice discussion on Mistletoe and the Garrison buff, and Tettles crashed out.
Yeah, that was annoying.
Yeah, it's back, except worse. Yeah, there's a holiday buff from, I believe it's already fixed, but there's a holiday buff that you can get, which gives you over a couple billion health.
Oh, okay.
Did you say billion?
I said billion.
Oh.
I believe it's billion. Now, I could be wrong, but I believe it's billion.
Great.
So
that's how this happened?
Yes.
Word. I guess.
Yeah, there's rumors that there might be a damage portion of it too, but as far as I know, I mean, if you have a couple billion health, you can pull whatever you want.
Huh, that's interesting.
They do some big pulls in there. At least they fixed the one-shot problem.
Yeah, that's true. And they fixed the one-shot problem, and honestly, if you look back on Classic, this is no different than going and getting in Nixia's head. Like, this is reasonable.
Bro, the funny thing is, if you ask Mythic Plus players based off the feedback I'm seeing, if you just like gave everybody 100 times the amount of health, they'd be like, "Yeah, this is great. Yeah, Mythic Plus is great. I'm not getting one shot. The mechanics are fair. I get to pull big now. Yeah, this is good. Best version of Mythic Plus there's ever been."
Dude, this season of Mythic Plus has been probably the worst exploited season I think ever.
Oh, it's out of control.
Right? Like, what have we had here? We started with the rogue exploits. Then we went to the follower buff, follower dungeon buff, and now the story mode buff, which still exists as far as I know. That one was never fixed.
What was the Dragonflight thing? There
was the Dream Surge. There were a couple buffs in the Dream Surge that you could take out of the Dream Surge. Then there was the Legion Stag,
the MC,
the Dream Surge Stag mind control thing.
Yeah,
dude, that one was hilarious because I stumbled onto like a 3 a.m. call with some M-busters that I will not name that saw a VOD of it, and they were all like trying to figure it out, and I'm just like, oh no! I knew we were waking up to trouble. They're like, it's some Legion guy, some tree or something, and they're like trying to figure out how to run it away. Or I'm like, oh no, this is gonna be chaos.
Then there was the Mistletoe, which Tettles hated. Then there was the Garrison one for Winter Veil. Then there was the Firework one, which is now. And who knows what else happened that wasn't announced.
Fireworks. Man, all this classic stuff is still in the game. It's actually kind of crazy.
Yeah. It's supposed to give you 5 stamina, but instead it gave you billions.
A lot, yeah.
500 million stamina.
Well, one thing at a time. Luckily, I think, I know this is like kind of a weird way to look at it, but there's a lot of the, I don't want to say competitive integrity, but like a lot of the effort from some of the best teams have shifted towards TGP and MDI and like that sort of thing. And so I feel like that's all unscathed, like all these things. And I think that for the most part, like, I'll be honest, if you're some guy doing 10s or 12s or whatever, and you're just messing around and you get some stupid buff and you blast through a couple keys, as long as it's not like super problematic, like, I don't know, whatever, I think it's really annoying. Like, I'm sure there's some people out there that are like griefing title, and there's like a very small handful of people out there somewhere that like aren't getting title because one random group snuck in because they were abusing it. But I think for the most part, like, as much as we talk about it every week, it's kind of whatever, like it's just, I don't really think it affects that many people. I think it's just fun to kind of see it go on. Like, I don't really think the top spots on the leaderboard of like Raider IO have been that like prestigious, at least as they used to be like before TGP.
Yeah, I think it's just like, it's not that it actually ends up affecting anything. It just, one, sucks to do, and it's like you kind of have to have this like moral question of like, are we going to actually be doing this thing as well? Because Blizzard could always just like hand down bans for exploiting in any capacity, and you could actually get caught in a ban. More often than not, they're not, but sometimes you could get pulled over for speeding.
Yeah. Well, that's your weekly saga. We'll see how many more end up before the end of the season, but
I mean, there might be even one that comes out before the end of the episode.
Yeah. In other news, go get the Sturdy Love Fool. It's available for the holiday event for, I think, 2 weeks. So you should go and grab that. It's really good for your enhancement shaman to go pre-build Tempest stacks and for something else in the future, I'm sure.
Yep. So speaking of other bullshit that for some reason is not an exploit and everybody does and is okay with, you can get the Sturdy Love Fool from the Valentine's Day event, and then you can use that when you normally couldn't pre-build resources, and then you can use it to build up resources and have more damage and healing that you should have. But that's not an exploit.
Be serious. It's only some buffs, only some resources that maintain, not all.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I'm sure Blizzard thought about that.
Yeah, it was intentionally whitelisted which ones they thought were okay and not.
Isn't it the other way around? Don't they blacklist things instead of the other way around?
I'm not sure. But...
I don't think they do either.
All right. The main topic of this show today is Blizzard saving Mythic Plus. Blizzard released a blue post, and WoW had covered it, and it was titled Massive Mythic Plus Changes in Season 2. Challengers Peril effects moved to 12s, Gilded Crests available from 7s, and I think that SQUISHEI was leading us on last week at Growl.
Yeah, I want to apologize to everyone on behalf of SQUISHEI. It's his job to be leaking important news during the podcast, and I don't know if he was, busy that day or something, but for some reason he waited one day to release all this news, even though he knew it somehow from Blizzard. And so, we're coming a few days late, but we want to. There's so much in here to talk about, and we can go back and rewatch the podcast and see if SQUISHEI was baiting us with some of those questions. But either way, it's like they've already before this post kind of like talked about a lot, right? Like about their scaling changes, about what they want to do with 12s and all that. And now they've dropped like this bomb, which is like a lot of stuff. Yeah, I don't where do you want to start here?
I guess we can just like kind of give a summary if you haven't caught the post. Gilded Crests now are available from 7s. Hero Track gear is available from 6s. M0 drops Champion Track gear. Tyran and Fortified have been moved to 7 and 10. Challengers Peril has been this has removed, but it's been moved basically to be added into the Guile. So it's just a part of the Guile now, where the Challenger's Peril is basically just on 12s. And at 12s, keys can no longer deplete past that level once you've timed every dungeon on that difficulty. So basically, if you've timed all 13s and you deplete a 13, it's not actually going to go down to a 12. It's instead going to stay at a 13 and re-roll into a different key. So there's a bit of a depletion mechanism. They also stated that the 2850 IO mount has been moved to 3000, which is all 13s-ish. So that mount has been moved from 12s to 13s. They also did some scaling changes that we're also probably going to cover. Where do you guys want to start?
Let's talk about the reward track stuff, the hero track and guild.
All the gear.
That was a huge topic this season. Basically what happened was breaking into that gear, like especially when it was early on, was very, very difficult for people. And I think one thing that, especially us who are just like, not only sort of like effectively grandfathered into 10 keys based off of the people on our friends list in our guild, but also like we just play the game for fun and we stream and we don't care that much. I think we lose sight that the way that most people play this game is not to say they have a to-do list, but you log on to World of Warcraft, you open up your character and you're like, okay, what do I need to do to make my guy stronger right now, right? And the reward track like path for this season was really, really weird, right? Like it was basically normal for a while, buy some BOEs, do the heroic dungeons, maybe some professions or renown if you want. Then it was delves, right? And clearly they kind of did that on purpose, where they wanted to showcase delves, and they didn't want the rewards to be bad because they wanted people to do them. The problem is the step after delves was Mythic plus 7s or actually it was Mythic plus 8s, right? Was it plus 8s or was it plus 9s?
In terms of gear, it was around 7 because you went hero track.
Yeah, it was around 7 or 8. Well, people wanted Gilded Crest.
Well, the Gildeds were 9s originally. And
Yeah, Gildeds were originally, well, basically like some 7s and 8s, but mostly 9s was what people wanted to do. And so the idea of going from you haven't done anything serious at all into doing +9 keys, like when the end of the path was +10s, like all-time 10s is like, okay, you've reached the max rewards and you're done. It was such a whack path, and I think that even admittedly it took me a little while to like register and figure everything out that was the way it played out. And so they're rewinding back a little bit here and sort of like adjusting the path again so that people can like, okay, your next step is to do +6s, your next step is to do +7s, because you need to do those in order to learn to do 9s and 10s. And so I think personally, I'm not really a big fan of like gatekeeping gear and like making really good gear behind really hard content. So I'm a little bit indifferent by it, but for sure it's going to be a much better playing experience for people now that the getting hero track gear and getting Gilded Crest is going to be much easier in M+ than it was in season 1.
I think that it's kind of important to make sure that you have that linear progression feeling, just in terms of like difficulty and also rewarding people for their time. And I think that what this system was kind of failing at was the fact that you were so heavily incentivized to immediately jump into the system at like a 7 or potentially a 9. That seems like that was a bigger problem. And I mean, Blizzard talked about that. They said lots of players would enter the system at a +7 since they didn't need more champion gear, and 7 was the first level to drop hero track from each run. However, often these players frankly lack the dungeon experience to succeed at that level. You also have Challenger's Peril on top of it. And so they talked about it, and they made some of the changes talking about that, where Gilded Crests are now available from 7s, hero tracks available from 6s, and M0 drops champion gear.
Yeah. I mean, with all those, though, rewards are closely tied to difficulty because they also increase the scaling, right?
Yes.
Like, the scaling of the base M0s is going up by about 25% or so, and then the difficulty per level is decreasing to 7% from 10%, plus no weird jump at 12% or at plus 12 keys, and the keystones are also not going to have Challenger's Peril, and the affixes come in slower. So, as you can see on screen there, a great graph. Is this Zorthas?
Yeah, Zorthas. Yeah.
I saw this, and it's a great graph that kind of illustrates like things are going to be a little bit harder at the lower levels at first, but you're getting better rewarded for it, and they're going to be easier at higher key levels, with a 10 being about the same, basically.
So things we talked about for a while. Does this here finally solve the on-ramp of what Blizzard, like we kind of discussed it for a few weeks in a row, where we were talking about the on-ramp to Mythic Plus being a little bit too much. People were jumping into 7s after having only done delves. Is M0 with the champion track gear going to help? Are 2 through 10s having that scaling change going to help? The Tyrannical and Fortified being moved to that 4 and 10 level, where the Peril is also being moved to the 12 level. Are these the things that are going to help the on-ramp? Because gut reaction, I feel like this is like a slam dunk if you kind of existed in the 2 through 10 level of the system.
Yeah, solved is a tough word. It's up to, again, I think this is, again, where we kind of missed a little bit. As competitive players, like, our mindset is always like focused on getting better at the game and being more serious rather than just pathing through as anyone would, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're playing a game and you're like, yeah, I'm just going to sort of like go about how the game wants me to go about, you do get stuck, and it is kind of weird. People like us will be like, all right, I'm struggling in these keys. I'm going to go watch a streamer. I'm going to go copy a build. I'm going to go practice rotation on target dummies. But realistically, that's not how the average person should have to play. If you want to play like that, you can, but really Blizzard sort of has that carrot on a stick where they're kind of leading you along, and I think that this is sort of leading people along a little bit slower through the path and then rewarding them better for that, whereas instead of creating this giant wall, and I think giant walls can be okay as long as they're more about time and less about effort and like figuring stuff out or whatever. Like, if it's a giant wall because it's some crazy impossible to solve puzzle or like some huge jump in skill, I think that's difficult. If it's like grind a bunch of these, like, that's at least one style of game design and it's not really that difficult. But I think this will definitely alleviate a lot of things. I think, especially too, there's this phrase that I think Dorky's been using, sort of like mid-core, the people that aren't necessarily like super competitive players, but like enjoy doing keys and even going beyond tens. I think that's a big group of the player base that got hurt a lot by this season. And I also think that's a big group of the player base that's going to be very, very willing to come back and give another season another try. I don't think there's going to be this whole like, oh, season 1 was so miserable for me, I hate this expansion, I'm quitting. Like I think a lot of people are going to look at the new raid, they're going to look at their character, and they're like, yeah, okay, let's see now. Like hopefully people are saying this reward structure is better, and I think, at least I hope, obviously, the season 1 of every expansion, we're going to see a lot more players than other seasons, just because that's how it is, that's the hype cycle. But I do think we're going to see a lot of players return in season 2. And like, dude, there's so many good changes to Mythic Plus. Like over the last few years, right? Like the removal of affixes, the new rewards. There's even more new rewards now with this mount. Just like the weekly vault, choosing stuff, upgrading stuff with Valor. Like there's so much good going on with M Plus that I think if they fix the on ramp, I think a lot of people will enjoy what's going on in season 2.
I think this will help, but I still think there's going to be a problem.
What's the problem?
The rewards from delves are too good compared to, like, people are still going to jump in at Hero Trek. As far as I know, the delve rewards have not changed. People are going to get champion into Hero Trek gear. And let's be honest here, the path of least resistance to getting gear is going to be delves, because you can do that solo versus finding 5 people of which you might not enjoy playing games with. So people are still like, WoW is still rewards driven. People are going to find the easiest way to get their gear. That is going to be delves. And once they're done delves, they're going to get a hop and figure out where the next pieces of gear are going to come from, which is going to be Mythic 6s, Mythic 7s.
Gosh, it's so funny to think about, because initial onset, when people were thinking about delves and their goals with delves, the idea of people getting Hero Track gear from delves was like great. Like basically it was like unanimous that everyone was like, this is great. This is an awesome idea. Like, yeah, give open world people more stuff to do, give them more gear. But now we're sort of seeing like the weird unintended consequences of it. It's like, well, people are going to go through the path of going up to gear until they get stuck no matter what anyway. And it's like, it definitely feels like a really weird way to get stuck.
Here's the problem. It's because people don't enjoy the fucking content they're doing, and they're only doing it for the gear that they want. I'm pretty sure the majority of people don't like delves. In my opinion, it is not fun content, especially at the higher levels. And I think a lot of people,
I think past 8s is terrible.
Also don't like doing Mythic Plus, especially when if you do 8 a week for your vault. They're only doing it for the rewards. So like, I don't think Blizzard can win, especially when people are only investing in the rewards and raids are a once a week lockout. And that's a problem, and there might not be a solution, and that's okay.
Yeah, there is I would say a pretty big dilemma though, of if you make it rewardless, like Growl's talked about, he would actually be fine with it having basically 0 reward, and you just, Hero Track is like the highest level of reward. Whenever you look at Plunderstorm, I think that Plunderstorm is like suffering from the fact that it doesn't have enough rewards right now. And I think it's kind of something that we talked about a little bit, where players are just like so rewards driven, where if you don't have something to continue to work for, people just quit or they don't try, right? Then they won't.
Yeah.
It's not that you won't play it, but people will stop playing it like the lifespan of it is just so much shorter.
Well, I think the hope there, at least when it comes to WoW, is that it's the gear that you're getting is a means to an end. It's not necessarily like, maybe it's true that some people just want to gear up and they don't care, but like the hope is that you get that gear and then your reward is being in a guild, and then either caring about your guild rank or your parses or your guild, or doing Mythic Plus and caring about your Mythic Plus score, or PvP and getting PvP rating.
Yeah.
The hope, and it is a little weird, right? Like that's the modern version of WoW mindset, rather than, the reward of classic WoW is to get the crazy raid staff that's twice as good as any other staff in the game. And it's like, that's the reward, and then you're done and you just sit in town with the staff and just laugh at everybody. It's definitely like a little bit weird, but that's the hope. I think that's the difference in Plunderstorm was like, let's say you had a Plunderstorm leaderboard, right? Where you had like, people with top kills and people with, you know, a rating or whatever. Personally, I don't know if that has a place, but that's sort of the example is like, well, then there might be people playing, right? But there's literally nothing to play for. Whereas, you know, you can get your gear from delves or low M plus, and then even if you were fully bissed out, like the hope is that then you would go and do M plus or do raid if you wanted to at least. But you might be right that maybe is just a big subset of people that just, you know, are mostly just gearing, and once they get their guy done, they're kind of just over it.
I'd honestly be curious if they removed like gear from delves, how many people would play it?
Oh, almost nobody that's not like an achievement hunter or whatever.
I would honestly be curious, but
I mean, I said
like,
that from the start. Like, I've been yelling that since episode 1.
I think there would be some. I think if you were just craving to play WoW, you could log in and do a delve. I think there is a section of the population that would enjoy that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what I did and why like I delve grinded at the start, just because like I have nothing else to do right now. I'm gonna do it just for fun on my alts because it's fun. Eventually that gets boring though, but I think that's the nature of rewards driven content and rewards driven gameplay. It's all about the rewards.
This might be my cope, but I don't know if I suspect that fewer players are going to be doing delves this season anyways, and I think that you're gonna have fewer players trying to jump into this +6. Like just like full hero track gear from purely delves. I think that players are probably going to actually pick up the Mythic Plus track immediately. In addition to that, we don't have a Heroic Week this year, so Mythic Plus is open immediately, and you don't have this weird delve thing that you're doing during where Mythic Plus isn't unlocked. So I think that will also, you know, further incentivize the people starting at M+2s and kind of progressing the system as it's intended to be progressed.
I think also, nope, lost it.
Nope. Yeah, and maybe it's just because I want to rub it in their face. Hopefully not, but I'd be very interested after 2 or 3 seasons to hear what Blizzard, their overall assessment of delves. You know, like is this the evergreen system of single player content that we've created that we're happy with? Like, is the participation numbers good? I would just be surprised if it is. I mean, maybe they are, right? I mean, that's the whole mole people joke. Like, maybe there are, you know, tons and tons and tons of players that are logging in and doing their weekly delves, but like. Let's be honest, the only people that are playing delves right now are people like Dratnos. Like, people who are just, like, you know, playing 10 alts, and they're like, you know, they're not even really that, like, is that the target audience for delves? Like, Dratnos isn't mole people, but he's, like, you know, some guy that enjoys WoW that wants to, like, do all the achievements and unlock all the things or whatever, right? And I mean, I don't know. It's hard. I think, to me, I don't know. I just think it's just a miss. I keep saying I don't know. It just delves just seem like a miss to me, and I think that Squishy's point of if they remove the rewards and made the rewards worse, you would just see participation fall off a cliff in delves, I think is 100% true, right? But to be fair, they've been giving, like, this next raid looks good. They've been giving tons of attention to Mythic Plus. Mm-hmm. So it's not to say that, like, oh, I'm upset with them doing delves, just delete these. You know, like, they're definitely spreading their time out and doing lots of things for lots of different players.
Yeah. I think no matter what, though, people are, like, especially with these changes, people are still going to complain about their party members just being unknowledgeable, dying to things, even without peril and all these other changes that we're going to talk about. We're going to see tons of complaints about people leaving keystones. People are, you know, not timing their keys due to this person who is not knowledgeable. Like, it's going to be the same old. Just how much I think might go down a little. But I still think it'll absolutely be there.
And I mean, it's exactly kind of what we talked about last week, where they made these very small changes to try to make the dungeons a little bit easier. Obviously, I don't think you're not going to like zone into them and be like, wow, this doesn't even feel like a WoW dungeon. It's so much easier. It's not like that. But they are very slightly easier. There's a little bit fewer kicks. They're trying to bring down the tank damage. And now, you know, they got peril off of the keys that players have claimed is too punishing. They're trying to at least bring down the difficulty of the people. Most of the people who do Mythic Plus, because most of the people, I would say 95% plus people, percentage of the people actually exist in the 2 to 10 system whenever they're doing Mythic Plus. And so they're actually trying to make that system a lot more fair for them by changing around actually a lot of the affixes too, but also changing the reward structure. I feel like the reward structure actually wasn't that big of a deal for me whenever I was looking at it. The biggest thing was the stuff that we hadn't talked about, the bargain affixes, being moved to 4, tyrannical and fortified being moved, and then the challenger's peril being tied into the guile. I feel like those are absolutely massive changes for the people who are playing Mythic Plus week in and week out.
Interesting. I think I don't know. I'm interested to hear you cook on that. I think moving Tyrannical forward or whatever isn't really that big of a deal. I also think Peril was a little bit of a scapegoat. Like, obviously, dying is already too punishing, and making it more punishing isn't something they need to do. But like, do you really think this is going to make a big impact on people's like progress from 2s to 10s?
I have a strong suspicion that the answer is going to be yes here. So first off, like I was saying, dungeon's a little bit easier. Hopefully tanking isn't like as hard. Obviously we don't know for certain, but hopefully tanking isn't necessarily going to be as hard. I don't think the bargain moving to 4 is actually a big deal, but I think that tyrannical or fortified replacing Challenger's Peril at 7, like, dude, those are way different of affixes, right? Tyrannical and fortified are like fine affixes, and Challenger's Peril is 3 times as hard as any of them. And then you get the other one on +10, which of course is going to like, it's kind of what we have right now. But I think that the absence of Challenger's Peril reduces the punishment level for having deaths. And I think that just in general, they also made the bargain affixes a little bit easier to play. Oblivion has been changed. Now they have Pulsar. And I think that while the scaling, the dungeons in theory should be, a bit more difficult in terms of scaling percentage, I think that the issue isn't the scaling percentage, because that is the amount of damage that the mobs are doing to you and the amount of damage that you have to do to the mobs. Those are not really the things that are the most problematic if you're actually like, doing a 7, doing an 8, doing a 9. It's the person that's dying over and over again and costing you 15 seconds on your timer, or like having this full wipe. And I think that not having this Peril is actually going to be a big deal. Again, I do think that people ended up using it as a scapegoat because I think the dungeons were a little bit too hard, but I think that all of these changes at once are going to... they're all small things, but cumulatively, it's actually a pretty big change for the people who are doing these levels.
We talked about, or like one of the things we talked about is kind of like de-arming the dungeons a little. And at Season 1, I know we talked about Dawnbreaker a lot, which turned out to be a joke.
Yeah.
But that was the way it was in beta. And like stuff like the Stone Vaults boss, like Tettles, what I know you've done a lot of them. What are the dungeon bosses that you feel like are going to be the hardest?
Like in the new
pubs
season?
are going to struggle on.
Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
Or Growl, if you've seen any.
Last boss of Rookery, I talked about that one, where you have to have like very specific placements of people.
That boss seemed like it was a mess.
I mean, that boss is just a mess for pugs, right? Like, I think that like if you're in a coordinated group, it's actually not that big of a deal. But I think if you're pugging like a no voice group, I think that boss is just an absolute nightmare. What are the other dungeons? Floodgate, I think, was pretty chill.
I will say, I don't know if you agree with this, Tuttles, but just from watching or my vibe, it feels like, to use the phrase disarming the dungeons, when they're looking at these dungeons that they brought back, like Motherlode and the new dungeon that they made, it did kind of feel a little disarmed, like they were like going back a little bit. But it feels like the new dungeons, like the ones that they've already made, are already just like so mechanically dense, like Rookery and Darkflame Cleft. Like those dungeons to me felt like they need to tone those down mega. Like the other ones, they kind of had a clean slate, so they kind of just like put them at a space that they thought was good. And I'm a little worried that it's going to end up like one of those Dragonflight seasons where it's like, the old dungeons are super easy. Everybody wants to do the old dungeons. And then like, every single new dungeon is like terrifying and it's just like insanely hard to heal and there's tons of kicks.
This might be a bad take, but I think the last boss of Darkflame Cleft is difficult. And then I think the 3rd and 4th bosses of Workshop are also very difficult for pugs. And it might just be because I do the key at such a high level that those gears end up like one-shotting me. But I feel like that mechanic just in general, the gears like swirling around the room, is always going to catch people off guard and end up killing them, where your healer is going to actually have a hard time of getting people topped back up. And then the last boss, just the movement of the orbs, I find to be a particularly challenging mechanic, because unless you're moving correctly, or you can immediately assess where that orb is coming from, melee DPS always end up getting hit. It's just something that always happens to pretty much every single melee on the last boss of Workshop.
I think that is a high key problem. The one that But
yeah, that might be a damage thing. That might be like the cogs hit you too hard, so I'd like...
Yeah, because like realistically, that 3rd boss it's just if the cogs hit you, they do damage, but there's nothing else that really does damage other than the Gatling gun.
Yeah.
And if that's not up, you get hit by a cog, it doesn't kill you, then it's pretty much worthless unless you get hit two back to back or something. So I think that might be a high key thing. I was thinking anything with like a healer check, like the third boss floodgate.
The boss floodgate?
The tethered one. The one where you're
Oh.
tethered, you have to walk around. They buffed that this last build, by the way. I don't know if you saw that.
No, they buffed the ambient damage on that fight? No, I had not seen
Yeah,
that.
so every time you're tethered now, it was like a 10% buff or something like that.
Hmm.
So that fight just does more damage now.
I do think there's been a little bit of a disarming. I think that there's always going to be like randomly really hard stuff because Blizzard, I think, just like Growl said, sometimes just makes really hard bosses in Mythic Plus. But I do think just across the board, it is feeling, again, very slight, but it is going to be easier. And so I think that in conjunction with all these changes that they're making, I'm actually excited for that because I think that these changes are good for the majority of the player base. Because the thing that I actually hate to see is I hate to see people not having fun whenever they're doing Mythic Plus, just because it means like so much to me as a person. I think it's great whenever people are doing Mythic Plus and having fun, but whenever people are just like really angry at the system and like not playing and taking patches off, that concerns me.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think, so we didn't even, we'll get into this now. We didn't even talk about, I think, the biggest problem of, at least like that I saw and like seeing friends quit or like people, quit, is that jump from 11s, 12s, 13s. And they kind of already addressed it. Now they have another change, right? Where they're removing the jump entirely from 11s to 12s, right?
Yeah, now it's just like instead of the Guile having the scaling, they changed how that scaling works. Right. So instead of
and add challenger's peril, but
yeah. So instead of it being this absolutely, I mean, look at this. The jump from 11 to 12 here was an insane jump in scaling. Where now it's a lot more gradual. I mean, it's going to be a little bit harder, but it's not 10% up front. It goes from 7 to 10%, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty big deal. In addition to the achievements that prevent you from lowering your key past that level.
Yeah, and frankly, I think that Peril is a better thing for 12s than you just get flat 10% harder scaling on them.
I think that's terrible. I mean, clearly they cooked up something for why they did that, but it just made no sense, right?
What, the Guile?
No, like why? Well, yeah, like why it was just 20% healing and damage at randomly at a level.
I don't know. I think that they thought that was appropriate whenever you're like getting rid of the Kiss Curse affixes. There's like a thing to actually remove the affix. I think that they thought that was appropriate. And then you start playing, you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, that was a miss for sure.
The mob damage, I think, was the biggest issue with that more than anything else too.
They tried. I can't fault them for trying, and good that they reverted it this after a season. So I will give Blizzard props for that.
Yeah. So one weird thing about the Keystone jumps, I'm interested to see how it plays out, and you can kind of see the curve a little bit. That might maybe make sense. Is I feel like at lower levels / gear farming levels, you do really like to have key levels condensed because it makes it easier to find groups. Like let's say that you had to do like +1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 20. Everyone's so spread out and it's harder to find people at your skill level or your key level to find groups. So condensing most of the juice of M+ between 6s and 10s, I think is really healthy for the group finder and like makes it feel more alive and like makes it easier to get into keys. However, as soon as you go from like someone who's playing for gear to someone who's playing to enjoy M+ to get score and stuff, I feel like you really want to have a lot of levels and a lot of jumps, because the fun of the game is doing a key level that you've never done before and completing it and moving up in score or whatever, right? And so I feel like that's where they kind of missed, and I hope this is an improvement here, is like, for the people who enjoy pushing keys, maybe not all of them are super good to the point where they're like doing title keys, but they do want to go beyond 10s, and it's like they got to 11s, and then 12s were just like it was just this massive wall that you had to work very hard to overcome. And I think that if they, like, to me, it seems like they almost want to like curb the scaling, and they want to make it so like the higher you go, it exponentially scales more to like I don't really know why. Like it's as if they want to like normalize keys and not make them go super high. But if
Yeah.
anything, I think it should be the opposite. Like as you move up, the jumps in key level should be smaller and smaller to kind of give people those chances of moving up, right? And like having more levels that they can
Yeah.
accomplish. Because like I mean, I'm sure that you guys have experienced this. Well, Tettles is pushing this season, but like you'll do a Grimbatol X, right? Like whatever level, I don't know what it is now, and it's like, okay, this is timeable, play safe, big IO, and then one level up, we're dead. Like this isn't even a key you want. Like you don't even want to walk into the key. It's that difficult, right? And it's like if the jumps are that big that you go from play safe, big IO to this isn't worth my time even trying. It's like, I feel like the jump should be more like smaller, and that goes all the way, right? That's not just like a high key problem. Like that's just as much a problem, if not a bigger problem, for the people who are doing 11s and 12s and 13s. And I'm kind of talking about nothing here because they sort of address this, but I just want to point out that I think they should even consider pushing that edge like even more and more and more, and like giving people more room to move up. I don't know if it's like just lessening the scaling is the problem. I don't really have a great solution for it, but that's definitely a step in the right direction.
I mean, dude, look at this. 11 went from 2.59, where 11 on the new system is 2.51, to 12 being like 3.13. Like, and that was still 13s are still going to be easier than what they were in the old system, just relative scaling wise, which is crazy to think about. They basically they cut out a key level with the guile,
right?
Which, I mean, I think that kills anybody who's that mid-core casual hardcore player that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks. Anybody who wants to actually casually push keys or something like that, you have to just, this 11 to 12 jump is insane. And I think that's why like LFG also ended up suffering so heavily this season too, because all of the people who would have casually pushed keys started to try to do these 12s after having completed all 11s and got completely walled.
Oh yeah. We'll have to see. Like every season we've gotten so far, this expansion has had major overhauls to Mythic Plus. So it's clear that they're like constantly iterating on it, which I think is good. We'll see what they'll take the data from this season and then improve it going forward.
Here's the thing too. I think every key level is important. Kind of like whenever you're at the gym and you like max out your bench. Like maybe the only thing that you need to do for your next max is just like 2.5 pound plates on each side, as opposed to, you don't have to slap on a 25. Like we don't have to go up that much more. Like there can be an in between. We don't have to jam on the next plate.
That's actually such a good example that I haven't really thought about because I'm so out of shape and I haven't been to the gym in so long. But like literally that's going to the gym. Like everybody who's worked out and like gained muscle in the gym knows that like you're benching, 2 plates, right? And then the next weight is literally 5 pounds more, like 5 pounds more. Like you're not going up. Like the equivalency would be like, okay, so you're benching 2 plates at 225. Then the next level is 250. Like to go from 225 to 250, it's like, I mean, you can do it, but it's just like so brutal on the mental, right?
How many reps at 225?
Weeks.
Like, how many reps at 225 do you have to do before you feel comfortable trying 250 at that point?
Exactly. And like to me, that's the most fun and like most enjoyable part about the gym is that like, you show up and like you just did something that you couldn't do last week, and you're like, holy shit, even if it's 5 stupid pounds. You feel like you're the king of the world, and I think that that's something that is also true with M+, and this key squish thing kind of has been taking that away, and I think people are like not necessarily identifying it, but they're sort of just like playing and getting stuck and not having fun and quitting.
I saw this post on the competitive WoW Reddit a few weeks back. It said, was the dungeon squish successful? And people started identifying like a couple of things. They said that it would be better if M0 dropped champion tier loot. Now they're relatively worthless. Hold on, let him cook. Blizzard fix this. And it's like, there's some stuff that people find it to be working, but they don't find it all to be working. Like, obviously, I think that the lower end, the squish ended up... I think that there was just like a couple of key levels at which the squish really made a mistake. M0, I think the squish was pretty harmful for. I think the 9 to 10 jump, the 6 to 7 jump, and then the 11 to 12 jump were all points of which the squish... It wasn't necessarily that bad, but there was clearly key levels missing, I feel like.
I kind of think those jumps just don't exactly belong. I don't know why I understood why affixes needed to exist at certain levels beforehand. Like you were building on a set of basics.
Yeah.
But now the affixes are, like, especially tyrannical and fortified. Those do nothing
That's a good point.
other than add a jump breakpoint. Like before, they existed at 2, so you just always had them. At this point, them being randomly added at 10 doesn't exactly make sense to me. It just adds an artificial breakpoint to add an artificial breakpoint.
I mean, I think that you could also... no, I don't necessarily feel this, because I tend to agree with what you're saying. You could make an argument that the dungeons would be too easy otherwise, and you actually want them prior to that breakpoint to be slightly easier. Which, I don't necessarily agree with, but I think that there is an argument that is there, where you're like... you don't need the dungeon to be that hard prior to a +4, or I guess prior to +7 now, where it doesn't need tyrannical or fortified. Then at 7, it should have a slight increase in difficulty, more so than what scaling can provide by itself.
Yeah, the way I see the Tyran Fort, at least the rule of it now, is in the progression levels, Tyran Fort is sort of like, it exists to change the dungeons around a little bit to make certain dungeons maybe easier, harder, or feel a little different. And then 10, at least the way I see it for most players, is like sort of the end goal, right? And I think that's sort of like, okay, now we need to have Tyran and Fort on the key, because, just to sort of like, I don't know, to say, okay, you've beaten this dungeon, right? You've done it with Tyran and Fort. Like, for example, like, let's say there's a dungeon like Workshop where it's, oh, every single boss is really hard, and then the trash is mad, right? It's like, oh, well, just wait till Fort Week, and then do the 10, and then get your achievement and be done, right? I think if that was sort of the gameplay loop for the people that was their end goal, it would be kind of shitty. So I think, at least to me, that's sort of where I see the purpose of it being. But I do agree that it's, like, not very interesting and a little bit lazy to just be like, oh, buff everything.
Mm-hmm. I do think that... The more I think about it, I think your argument makes sense. They could have just removed it. And it's just like, it's an infinitely scaling system. These, whenever they're added together, they just kind of cancel one another out. It could have just been the scaling.
I mean, there is... I think it made more sense in the previous system, where those breakpoints lined up with something. Like the 7 breakpoint of Challenger's Peril lined up with Hero Track Gear. The 10 breakpoint lined up with Myth Track Gear, right? Like there were certain breakpoints, but you got rewarded for accomplishing those breakpoints.
Yeah.
Now those breakpoints, I mean, they still kind of exist. 10 obviously still for Myth, but now Hero's at 6 before the other Fortified and Tyrannical. So Tyrannical and Fortified is beating the Gilded Crests, I guess. So I guess it's kind of there. Still, I don't know. It's just
Side note, I want to shout out the additional Gilded Crests we're going to get next patch, too. I know we talked about that a few weeks ago whenever they made that change. I think this is going to feel a lot better for players, just in general. Just getting more Runed and Gilded Crests is going to be a lot less of a grind. Now, my hope is that maybe they'll do something about Flight Stones next.
Flight Stones are just so pointless.
It's just it's a pipe dream. Okay.
Like, I hate trying to defend them or talking about them, because, like, they're not really that big of a bother, but, like, they just serve no purpose. Like, like, I kind of get the idea of, like, having some sort of reward that you get from everything, but, like, not Flight Stones. Make it something else.
Okay, so those are all the changes that affect most of the players. Any final thoughts?
I was just going to talk about the depletion thing. But...
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the depletion thing. We did forget about that.
You want to bring this in, Squishy? Bring the depletion thing.
I just wanted to know your thoughts on the depletion thing, because I have some thoughts on it.
Okay, so immediately, let's just read this. One additional note, and of relevance to players at the upper end of the system, we're changing the rating requirement, the new Keystone Legend achievement being added in Season 2. We're moving it to 2850 to 3K. Basically, this is going to have the mount attached to it. We will also be decoupling this achievement from the system that allows players to set a floor for their high-level keystones instead. Or high-level keystones. Instead, once a player has finished all 8 dungeons at a Mythic plus 12 within the timer, their keystone will no longer automatically de-level below a 12. Once a player has timed all dungeons at 13, the new floor will be 13, and so on for all keys at or above level 12. My gut reaction is that I think that this is fine. I don't think it ends up affecting players like myself because I played too much. I think it's actually pretty good for people who want to avoid doing homework keys. But there is kind of this weird situation where the delta of like top to bottom difficulty between dungeons has always existed, where one dungeon ends up being harder than the middle of the pack, and then one or two dungeons ends up being a little bit easier. And so you'll have, like, say for this season, you'll have like a 16 Arakara, 16 Mists, 15 of everything else, and a 14 of Grimbatol. So your min floor is a 14, and you weren't really depleting a 14 of any other dungeon except for maybe Grimbatol, but you wouldn't do that dungeon as your homework key anyways. You'd probably rather log off.
Yeah, that's my thought. I actually don't think this achievement matters.
I don't think it's bad. I think there's specific situations in which it can help.
I think this achievement is I think that it is good that they added it. I don't think this addresses the problem. Because like you said, the top keys right now are 20 in Arakara +1, 19 in everything else, and then an 18 in Grimbatol. So realistically, if you're pushing anything that is not specifically a 19 Grimbatol, it is like a 19 of any other dungeon, you are not getting anything from it. It is a homework key still. And when you are pushing a 20 or 21 in those other dungeons, this achievement does nothing for you. Not until you do a 19 Grimbatol, and that's probably harder than a 20 or a 21 of some of the other dungeons.
Exactly.
So, like, I like the sentiment. I think we'll see how it goes, but I have a feeling this is going to do nothing.
I actually disagree a little bit. My initial thoughts were the same as you guys, but keep in mind, we're playing in an area where we're mostly playing with people that we know and like a consistent group. And so my first thought was sort of like that, right? Like, let's say you have mostly 14s, and then maybe some of the harder ones are 13s, right? And so like your key doesn't go below a 13. And you ask yourself, how often do you find yourself doing 12s? And the answer is like almost never, right? Like if you ever have a 13 or a 12, like maybe you do a 12 and you like 3-chest it, but like usually you're not depleting 13s. And like if you have every key timed at 13 or 14, you're just not depleting 13s, right? Well, pugging it's a complete crapshoot, right? Like you can be pugging and you might have your highest key is Grimbatol because you got lucky and you got some crazy good tank in your group with some good DPS and you like time the key, right? So I think you're way more likely to get benefited from this in pugs and be able to list your key multiple times just because your distribution of like what's your highest and lowest key is going to be a lot tighter than like a regular group, if that makes sense, right? I will give it to you that I don't think it's like that big of a deal. Like it's definitely not the case of this fixes depleting or this makes this changes everything. But it is possible if you're a solo player that you just get buried, right? Like you could have like all-time 14s of maybe a couple 13s. You have a 13 key, you do it, you deplete it. You have a 12, you do it, you deplete it. You have an 11, you do it, you deplete it. Like it is possible because you're playing with different people, and a lot of times the people in those keys need that score. You can get buried to the point where you just are quitting for the week.
I agree.
Especially if you're playing a class that's like not super desirable. Your only option to get into groups is to list your own key. I think this is good protection from getting buried. Basically, this is like, look, if you want to push your own key, it's still going to be effort, right? You still might have to do homework sometimes, but you're not going to get buried to the point where like you have to do 3 keys in a row in order to get a key with score. Like you can always basically take your key into Group Finder, time it, and then have at least a chance at something that's useful to you or that you can use. And I think this is, while it's going to be basically useless for us mostly, I think it'll be much better for the pug scene in terms of the availability of keys.
I also think that there's this dynamic where basically I actually don't know if it's going to increase the average score of a player who's, getting title or something like that, funnily enough. Because at the end of the day, you're only able to get the key doesn't deplete past whatever your floor is, and like we pointed out, establishing that floor is only as difficult as the hardest key of that season, whether it be Grimbatol or whether it be Rise from last season or whether it be whatever it was. Right? There's always a hardest key, Vortex Pinnacle, and it's normally one key level below whatever else the rest of the field is, and that kind of keeps it in check. a little bit. But I think that Growl is spot on with the fact that I think it helps people who are. You should feel less worried about putting your key into LFG, because I think that a lot of people were concerned about putting their key in LFG because like what happens if it depletes and I'm left with a key that's completely unusable? I can't play for the rest of the week. Now you're no longer in that situation. You can actually say you have, a 14 GB and you are depleting it. Now the people could zone out, but you could also request them to stay and like finish the key. That way you can actually get it rerolled into something that's a little bit more valuable as well, especially if it's like kind of close.
Actually, I have 2 questions about implications of this system. So number 1, basically in Pugs, you just, keys depleted, leave. Do you think that having this situation where, okay, my key won't deplete, right? Like, should we finish this dungeon? Should we learn more and like continue out and then run it again? Do you think that's going to happen more, or do you think people are just still going to be like, yeah, this group sucks and just bounce?
Gut reactions, people are probably too selfish and they care more about their time than anything else, and they'll probably just leave.
I think it depends on how the group looks. If it's just like first pull, somebody tripped on a swirly going in, you might just run it back. But if you're, you realize that you have a boom kid in your group who has fallen off the edge 5 times, it died multiple times, like you're probably not going to stay.
I mean,
that leads to my question, which is, do you think there's going to be cases where you have somebody who places you like, say you're going into LFG and you see this guy's key like GB14, and then you go to LFG 2 days later, you still see that same guy GB14, end of the week, Monday, same guy GB14, all week that they're just having the same key and posting it over and over and over again.
Despair.
That is...
I mean, that's what it'll turn into, right? Like it will. Ultimately, like having more availability of keys means you'll have more attempts at the ones, and like we've always said that, right? Like if they remove depleting or allow you to do whatever keys, it's going to turn into just you doing the same key that's the hardest possible key over and over again until you time it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do think it helps. Like you talked about people who are playing with like pre-made 5-mans and stuff like that. I do think it helps as well if you like jump into a different group. Say I'll play with like, or Growl will have like a main team, right, that he's doing keys with, and they're on average 1 key level higher than the people that I'm playing with. This is going to be
my second question. Yeah,
on average 1 key level higher than the people I'm playing with. Then I invite Growl to come heal my group because we didn't have a healer, and Growl loads in. More often than not, we kind of like see his key and we're like, okay, so his key is going to be off limits. They're probably going to want that key. But now we can actually use his key. I think it's actually going to be a little bit more usable. But in addition to that as well, Growl has a key that can't deplete, and it's higher permanently than the ones that we have. So is there going to be some level of boosting that's attached to that? We also have a Q&A question about boosting, so we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, so it's going to be crazy, right? So imagine if, let's say my team is doing 17 keys, and I get invited to some buddies who are doing 15 keys. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever, I'll do some keys. And I have, not only do I have a 17, but I have a 17 of the easiest possible key, right? Make it be an Arakara or a Miss or whatever. And it's a key that can't deplete. And we have this full group of people who have never timed a 15. Is it going to become tournament realm where we're just like, hey, let's just sit here and just spam this key over and over again to try and get it done? Because that's going to be a weird dynamic, right? Because I think that's a thing that could happen. Like, imagine if you're a group that has, you roughly are in the 15 level, still pretty good players, and you have somebody like, me, for example, who could lead you and help you and figure out what's going wrong. You could sit there and spend 5 hours running the same key over and over and over and over again, and then come out of it at the end of the day with a timed 17. Is that good?
I think this is what some people asked for.
Yeah. I think that specific exploit of the system is not good. Yeah.
I think this is exactly what some people asked for, and Blizzard was like, okay, take it.
Yeah.
Make your own bed. And I think they'll review after this.
I doubt that that's going to happen all too often, realistically. I mean, I do think it is going to happen some, but we already do cringe stuff to like time high keys when we're pushing Growl. Like, think about how key re-rolling works and stuff like that. Is that really that much? Okay, it's kind of different than key re-rolling, but like,
it's not even close. Dude, running a key 20 times in a row, back to back to back with the same group, it's not even close.
Yeah,
like, that's like tournament. That's on live.
Yeah. Actually, I don't
know. So think about this now, okay? It seems even maybe slightly reasonable in the situation that I pose, right? What happens when I get a DM from some guy? Hey, Growl, love your stream. My group is timing 14s and 15s. I'll send you, 10 million gold and come do 17s with us, and we'll just run your key over and over again. And it's not even people that I know, right? Like, dude, boost it. Like, oh, man.
All right. That leads to
I know,
this week's Q&A. From
right?
Bigger Fish, he asks, are you concerned removing this friction, allowing boosters to have an entirely different playing field than someone genuinely pushing keys, either through pugs or as a team, is going to lead to rampant increase in key sales / title boosts?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Yes, I do. More often than not, you actually don't want to offer up your key first. Okay, so how the current system works is somebody like will post in like a Discord channel to be like, "Yo, I'm looking for 18 Dawnbreaker for this sale," and you see there and you sit there and you look at it and you're like, well, 18 Dawn, not that hard. My keys, if they depleted, I'd be kind of sad, and my group actually won't be too happy. But now in this current system, you know that at least you'll have either multiple chances to run that 18 Dawn for the sale, or you're just gonna get a 19, which your group is gonna be fine with you having a 19.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. I think concerned, no, because no matter what anybody does, boosting is going to happen. You can't stop boosting. It is something that people want, therefore it will exist.
I don't think it
Even if
outweighs
you-
the benefit of the system either.
No, I don't think so either. No matter what you do, boosting will always exist. Therefore, you should just not. It should not matter realistically in terms of your decision making. Make it more fun or more convenient for players. Boosting is just going to happen.
Yeah, that's an excellent take. Regardless, like I would even go as far to say it will screw with boosting, but who cares? Like boosting is going to happen. It's going to screw with it, but like if this is a system that benefits everybody and people enjoy it and have more fun, you should not remove or alter the system just because of idiot boosters. However, I will say that from being a part of high key boosting now for several years, this is going to have a massive impact on things. Like there's a lot of situations where you have a guy who needs boosting who is willing to pay a whole lot of gold, but might not be very good, and he really needs this 17 Grimbatol, and you're like, first of all, you have to get that key that you need, and then second of all, like, is this going to be a huge waste of your time because the guy's just going to die 5 times and deplete the key single-handedly? Now, well, it could be a waste of your time, but you have a way higher shot of getting paid. Because generally the way things work in high key boosting is like, unless the guy is like totally throwing, you just don't really charge him until you get the key timed. Like it's basically like if you time it, he pays you. If you don't time it, he keeps his money and you just keep trying. Usually is how it works. And so being able to retry a key multiple times, like there's so many sales that I've done where a random pack gets pulled or like something stupid happens and you deplete the key because of it, and then it's like, well, all right, I just wasted a time there. But like if we would have had another one of those keys, we just instantly would have sent it again and timed it. So I mean, I think it's definitely going to make boosting a lot better and a lot more lucrative. So I hope that it has a very positive impact on the players, because I think I fully agree with Squishei's take that regardless of if it messes with boosting, I think that we just have to think about the average player and the fun that they have and whatever. I also think that the amount of people like that are getting boosted I know a lot of people like to think like, oh, they're messing with title range or this or that. Like we all know there are some dog shit players that get boosted that don't deserve to be in title range that are in there. But I don't think it has that big of an impact on the overall player base. Like, obviously it sucks to be one of those people that are on the fringe, but I don't think it's gonna, maybe there's a few more buyers that end up in title range next season than last season. It's like, the impact will be minimal.
I was looking
and I mean, this is the 0.1% of the player base we're talking about.
I was looking at some math on it at one point, and it moved the like boosters. You can like kind of tell, like you normally kind of know how many people are actually boosted per season, and it ends up moving the title like 1 point total. You're just like, okay. Which, it's again, like you said, it sucks if you're on the fringe, but Blizzard actually rounds down the title cutoff, so that actually adds more people in than were actually boosted over the title in the first place. So, like, I don't know.
People just hate boosting.
It sucks. I mean, yeah,
Some
like,
people
to comes off as hypocritical, and that's why people hate it, right?
Do you remember when Mike Ybarra, like however long that was ago, admitted to boosting raid sales, and the community freaked out?
I do remember that, yeah.
Holy crap!
Because he said
Like-
something on Twitter like, "Oh, doing AOTC sales or something like."
Yeah, something that.
It was essentially like a go live tweet, like, "Oh, doing a couple keys and then AOTC sales tonight or whatever," and then people just blew up. And to be fair, this is one of those things where I group it in like the RMT category, right? Of dude, boosting fucking sucks. Like I can sit here and make money from it and be like, this is fucking trash. Like I think the game would be way better if this didn't exist. But I mean, don't hate the player, hate the game, right? Like if they're gonna do it and allow it, and then I'm gonna make my money from it, and I'm gonna do it because why wouldn't I? I'd be stupid not to, because the next guy will. I'm telling you that there are discords where there are just fiends of people where someone says, "Oh, need DPS for a 16 Dawnbreaker," and 17 people immediately me, and it's like, if me deciding not to boost isn't gonna have any impact on anything. And so, I mean, I think it's terrible. I think it's not good for the game. I think there's a select situations where it's good. I've met some interesting people boosting along the ways of essentially along the lines of like people that just have a lot of money that want to experience high Mythic Plus and feel what it's like to be a part of a really good team. And they're not sitting here like trying to buy a title to like get into a guild or anything. I think that's like fine. But for the most part, I mean, boosting is not great. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So circling back, I feel like this was actually the only change that Blizzard made with this floor change that wasn't like a slam dunk in this post. I feel like the rest of these were like easy wins that Blizzard made. I think that most people view these as pretty positive. This one, it's not. I actually think it's more positive than it is negative. I don't think it's like some slam dunk that people may have initially read it as. Do you guys agree? All that?
Yeah, I think everyone also has a different opinion on that too. Like, I think pretty much everyone agrees that the scaling was weird. I think everyone agrees that the reward curve wasn't great. I think that everyone has a different opinion on, there are people that say that they should literally make the game tournament realm and do whatever key you want. There are people that, like me, that play hardcore that want your character to get deleted when you die once, and there's everyone in between. So I think that this is also one where they're never going to have a line of the patch where every single person's going to be like, yep, that definitely makes this better. There's always going to be a problem with how they decide to do the depleting thing.
I also think by announcing this, they upset a lot of people who wanted no depletions for 10 and below keys. Because they saw that they can clearly make not depletions a thing, and they're wondering, well, why didn't they make keys below 12 to, not deplete? Why do you guys think that is, out of curiosity?
Yeah, to me, I think the biggest, like, the most obvious group there is the people that don't necessarily enjoy Mythic Plus. They're raiders, they're PvPers, they're good players, and they can do 10s. And they would love to have all-time 10s and just never have their key deplete. That way they'll always have a 10 key and they can just run it and get their rewards and leave whenever they want. I would have maybe liked to see that group also been helped. Talking about 9s and lower, I don't really know. To me, I mean, I remember I got hooked on Mythic Plus and I thought the system was great. Obviously, like, I don't mind throwing people a bone in lower keys, but at the same time, like, the deplete and the time and the 2 chests and all that is like part of the magic. But I would maybe like to see some sort of something, but who knows? Like, I don't know. Then maybe the people that, if they want that, then they can time all-time 12s or 13s, Like, if you're that good of a player that you're just slamming out your weekly 10s, then get that achievement and get all-time 12s or 13s, and then you have that key every week, and then just drop it to a 10, do it, and then if it, whatever.
Yeah. It's kind of weird because, like, if you gave them this achievement, right, if you gave them this exact system where they had to time all the keys on the same level to actually get that floor, I actually don't think it really affects those people because they're not doing all of the dungeons at
exactly. Very rarely as you're
level.
moving up, do you have all-time to 8s, when you're doing a 9.
So you would actually, have to do some situation where they didn't deplete at all?
Yeah, I just think it's not as feasible. I think that's leaning more towards the category of just make keys never deplete ever rather than the system.
Yeah,
so
I mean, based on...
I guess from a game design perspective, like, having depletion actually increases replayability of the system as a whole. Like, these people are your sweatiest and most hardcore players. They're going to play the system no matter what, so you're not really worried about them actually bowing out because you're giving them something that's a little bit more player friendly, whereas, like, the other people, having something that creates replayability might actually increase their player retention.
I think it might also just be stakes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's
The
more so
feeling of-
stakes. I think it's definitely. I mean, stakes. But like having a more intriguing stakes on the line does
Mhm.
increase retention too. Like they go hand in hand. But I do think it's more so like having some sort of risk element, right? Like that whole on ramp of 10 minutes in the key, 20 minutes in the key, like 30 minutes into the key. Like now you're really like, oh man, if we mess this boss up, like I'll time it and get scored. But if we lose it, like we're fucked, Which is a little bit weird because those incentives aren't really aligned again when you're pugging, right? Like it makes so much sense when we're a group of 5 people playing together. And I think that's sort of how the system was intended beyond tens, like if you're doing super hard keys. But let's be honest, like Mythic Plus is really fun and people are going to play it however they want. And some people are just good players and they're going to pug very difficult content, even if it's miserable. And I think that we need to consider those people and like make it around them. I don't know how the depleting system will fix it or whatever, but.
Yeah, just an interesting question.
Yeah. My final thoughts on this are I'm glad that Blizzard has actually been trying to make a system that's not one size fits all anymore. And that's going to be the end of my thoughts there, because the fact that they're trying to make the system work for different groups of people, I think is actually going to help Mythic Plus be better, as opposed to trying to shoehorn everybody to play in the exact same system. Okay. Guys, I got something interesting for you guys today. We have a moral question in World of Warcraft. Have you guys heard about this guild drama related to sales of a Mythic Ansurek lockout and boosting? Have you heard about this, Growl?
Very vaguely. So my understanding, it had something to do with someone who was in a guild and then they got kicked or something, and then they took the lockout and then ran it with someone else or something. Is this the same story?
Yeah. So there was a warlock in a guild. They kicked him because he was too toxic. He was also basically benched on Ansurek. He killed through Silken Court. That guild extended after Silken Court. He actually did some pulls on Ansurek, and then they benched him because toxicity and performance. He then extended his lockout with them, and how it works is like basically you keep their lockout. It's like the exact same lockout, of course, right? So that makes sense. So he's extended his lockout, and that guild who has removed this player from the guild is going to be progressing Queen Ansurek. They're getting rather close to a kill. This guy is an asshole. And he, to spite his old guild who has removed him, has purchased a cutting-edge Queen Ansurek kill and has paid a premium to a guild to use his lockout. And they're like, yeah, whatever, man, you got the lockout. This is fine with us. Like, we don't really care that much.
Better for them.
Yeah,
too,
it's
right?
it's easier. We don't have to re-clear. This is chill. And so the old guild, the sale happened on a Wednesday. So the old guild went in on Tuesday in this lockout, and they all saved themselves to the lockout. They did their raid or whatever. And so then Wednesday rolls around when the sale happens. And so this old guild is already saved to it. This new guild doesn't know initially that this is a stolen lockout. And then after this guild has saved themselves to it, they realize that it's a stolen lockout. They proceed to kill Queen Ansurek after knowing it was a stolen lockout, but there was probably about a 15 to 20 minute discussion as to whether or not it's ethical to actually kill the boss. And so the boss was killed. The guild that owns the lockout, probably owns the lockout. I would describe it as owning the lockout. The guild that is owning the lockout now they can't raid this week. They have to re-clear the raid again. And the GM basically stated that they're probably still going to get cutting edge, but this is incredibly frustrating, and the entire guild is sad about the situation. So the question is, who is at fault? Who are the assholes here? Who do you blame? And should Blizzard punish anybody that's involved with the situation?
I'm going to go for the based answer. I think this is Blizzard's fault. I think raid lockouts are shit, and they need to remove that ASAP.
Apparently there was more to the story. I don't know if you heard the follow-up. So they got another lockout. Did you say that part?
They got another lockout.
No, yeah. So I think it was Tarlo or Draco. Somebody in the raid leader exchange got them another lockout to help them out. They still missed raid days, but they have another lockout starting next week.
That's great.
It's great. However, apparently, allegedly, this same asshole is now paying another premium of real life dollars to get them to boost that stolen lockout again.
Okay, so basically the guild who owns this new lockout, he went around and then started asking other people who are associated with the lockout to get it off of them. Is that what's going on?
I don't know how true it is, but that is what I've heard. I
Alright,
don't know anything else past
I
that.
think we figured out who the asshole is now.
Okay, so clearly the guy who has stolen his guild's lockout and paid for it to get boosted is definitely the biggest asshole here. I would make an argument that he should probably be banned in some capacity for breaking the social contract. I don't even know if there's a rule necessarily against this, but at minimum, just breaking the social contract, ban him. Like, it stopped that shit.
Well, I think if you're paying, I don't know.
Okay, the RMT, if that's actually true,
yes,
that's bannable.
That's obviously a ban. I mean, I don't know. I go back to Blizzard. Like, you made the system. Like, your fault. Like, what is this nonsense that some player can do this? Like, for this to be a thing that a person can do to their guild, like, in the restraints of the game, is like, dude, what? You know, like, imagine, like, okay, you have master loot where all the loot goes to the raid leader, but anyone in the raid can just click a button at any time and just take all the loot from the raid leader and it's theirs. And then Blizzard's like, hey, you shouldn't do that. It's like, well, why the fuck does this button exist? Like, I don't know. I think the lockout system's terrible. I think they need to get rid of this. And hopefully this incident will actually be a precursor to them removing it.
Do you remember what was it, like, way back when it was like Method? Somebody stole Method's lockout in Nighthold or something.
Hostage. Yeah.
Blizzard had to get involved and, like, I don't remember the full story, but, like, they wanted to trade full potions, or they said they wanted to trade full potions to a raider. So they got invited to the group. Then they managed because they were in the group, entered their lockout, accepted it, and stole the lockout hostage.
So how this happens is, like, you can only be in a raid lockout if you're in the main raid that first entered the raid lockout. So that's how it was held hostage, basically, right? So then that guild couldn't actually enter that. That was a crazy story. That was Nighthold, right?
It was Nighthold. I don't remember who it was, but
okay.
Yeah.
So do you blame the boosting guild at all for I would say knowingly killing Queen Ansurek during a stolen lockout? Because I've seen some people get very this is, I think, is the one where there's the interesting moral dilemma where some people feel very strongly one way or the other.
If there's very obvious evidence that they knew everything that was going on, yeah, they probably shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
I think that the thing about Raid is Blizzard actually cares about Raid. Like in M+, you can just walk in with Torghast buffs and Dream Surge and do whatever you want and nobody cares. But as soon as the word Raid comes into the picture, you got to be real careful with what you do. And I think that the fact that this is a mythic Raid lockout that involves an entire guild, I think you should be careful here.
I mean, I do think some of the blame goes to them, because if they knew before they pulled, and they could have just canceled the sale.
I will say it does suck to get your entire guild saved to that stolen
absolutely,
lockout, right?
But I think, like, giving up a sale is probably okay.
Yeah. Well, no, it definitely sucks for the guild, you know? Like, I think sunk cost doesn't apply here, but, you know, to say that, oh, we could have gotten another buyer, but instead we got this guy, and now we're losing gold for the guild. Now we're losing it weeks worth of time because our raiders are saved. It definitely sucks super bad for them, but at the same time, like, you're just sort of handcuffed there, I think. Like, I think that it's... I don't know.
Let's be honest here. Somebody offers you, I don't know how much it was.
20 million.
You know, 100... How much?
20 million to kill Ansurek.
That's like double the normal price for a Queen Ansurek kill right now.
Oh god.
If somebody offers you over double, it's over double, because I'm pretty sure, like, it's like a 9 million now or something. So, like, over double the amount, and says, hey, I have this lockout, but you have to use it, and I'm going to pay you over double. Do red flags go off in your head? Because they surely would with mine.
I don't know why he's wanting to use this. Yeah, it would. Like,
Can you explain why he has to kill the boss on the lockout? Like, why doesn't he just sit there in the raid?
Because once the boss is dead, that lockout's dead, and he doesn't need to sit in the raid.
He could have sat in the raid and just...
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, it's one thing if he's spending, like, you know, 500k or whatever to not waste his time, but, like, if you're this going out of your way to grief this guild. Like, how do you not just sit in the raid to grief them? You know what I mean? Like, why are you like, dude? 20 million gold is a lot of money. Like, why don't you just sit there in the raid?
They probably could have gotten a GM to get him out of the raid. Though.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, God, that is evil. If that was his thought, right? Like his thought was literally like, if I camp the raid, they might be able to fix it. But if I kill the queen, then there's no way Blizzard can fix it, and I'm 100% screwing this guild. Like that's brutal.
That guy is such an asshole. Yeah,
like he's willing to pay like hundreds of dollars, possibly thousands worth of gold just to do that. It's like, geez.
I think that he should be banned. I think that they're like we wouldn't have taken the Sale and Might. And if we accidentally got ourselves locked in Vesper, I know that our GM is like, "What the fuck is this? We're not killing this boss."
Oh yeah, I mean, I would like to think that your guild, Vesper, my guild, like we would see that coming before we accepted it, because like 200% on a sale and you have to use this lockout to save time is just like,
dude,
we're getting this free sale. What's going on?
Vesper had this thing that always happened where every single tier always got banned for RMT, and our red flags would be going off. Where's this gold coming from? We're gonna get banned again. that would be our red flag. It's like, holy fuck, we're gonna get banned again.
To me, it seems like the guy just didn't play his cards right. Like he shouldn't have made it suspicious, right? Like, well, imagine you just go to a guild and you just say like, hey, trying to buy a queen kill, and then you're like, hey, by the way, I have a lockout, my guild just disbanded, we're not raiding anymore, like I'm really sad about it and I just want to get my cutting edge, I've gotten it every season, like I'll let you guys use my lockout, can we just kill it on this? I feel like most guilds would say yes. You know what I mean? Because you're saving time, right? Like, why wouldn't you say, oh yeah, sure, we'll go on your lockout? And I feel like you can very easily trick a guild and not pay extra. So I don't know. To me, the story's a little bit fishy, but like it seems like so mischievous and malevolent. Dude,
now they have to like re-clear the raid. Dude, if he actually snakes them on a second lockout, I would feel so bad.
I mean, I don't know. He would have to get access to it, and that would be.
All right, Squishy. Mike's got to donate them a raid lockout.
Apparently they have one. I don't know the details though, but apparently they're ready for it tomorrow. But yeah, that absolutely sucks.
I would be so pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we think that obviously guy who stole the lockout, asshole. Guild who killed the boss probably should have known better. Do we think that they're assholes? Yeah, basically.
Some.
Definitely the leadership of the guild.
They definitely did not do
very questionable.
It's questionable at best.
To me, it's hard to know. Like I feel like this is one of those tales where like the details are skewed by now. Like maybe all the details are very cut and dry, and I'm not aware. But to me, like every single detail of like, oh, the guy was willing to pay double, and everyone in the guild knew that it was a stole. Like to me, it's a little weird. Like it's probably realistically like the guild thought the guy was a dumbass and then learned later, but then like, you know, 2 of the leaders didn't tell anybody and no one else in the guild knew, you know what I mean? So
all right.
Okay, that's the end of that conversation. Any cool stuff you guys have seen this week?
Have you heard about the food that allows you to drink twice as fast? I found out about it today.
There's more food?
Yeah, the marinated maggots. It's food where you can apparently drink twice as fast. If you drink mage food and then marinated maggots, you get to drink twice as fast. Apparently.
Oh, that's the stuff you buy with Kedge in.
Yeah.
I swear the impression was that it doesn't work in M+.
Did they?
So
okay,
this was something.
I might have been baited.
Okay, so this was something that was brought up in my attention, like at the very beginning of the season. That people talked about, that was like, because it just had some crazy number on it. It's possible that it got changed, but my understanding was it got what like you couldn't use it in instances or something. I remember looking at this and I remember not being able to use it or whatever.
I think this works. I think the same thing with the Beldar's Bounty works with mage food where you can double drink.
Fair enough. All right. Well, go into store, then you get follower dungeon buffs for whatever you're doing.
Perfect.
That's a good tech. Oh god.
Growl House Classic. Any Java?
So we did our first Molten Core raid. They base it was such this is such a weird thing. I don't know. We can talk about a little bit of drama. I'm not going to go too far, but so the idea behind the raid was not to say bad players, but the goal was to get as many people that have no idea what they're doing as possible into a hardcore raid where if somebody dies, they delete their character. Right? Like that's how it works. And so it creates this huge drama nonsense of like it's really funny, but at the same time, there's this fine line of like, well, what happens when somebody who's really bad lets somebody else dies? And then now all of their chatters are like in the other person's chat, like making them feel bad, like trying. It's this weird, like, I don't know. I've been like really thinking about drama lately because let's be honest, most of the people in M Plus, you turn on your stream, you slam whatever's on your playlist, you do keys, you answer the same like 5 questions over and over again, you show your talents, maybe you crack some jokes, if you're a good streamer, you get a little bit more viewers, if you stream a little bit longer, you get more, but M Plus is like pretty vanilla streaming. I've been entrenched in this world of these people that are like, completely like scatterbrained content masterminds slash idiot slash it's just such a crazy world of people that like are constantly thinking about entertaining and drama and like you say one thing and you just get an LSF thread made about you and it's just so weird to think about like the idea of like making a content guild quote unquote where like we're trying to get idiots involved but then like the idiots do idiot things and then you're not allowed to call them idiots because that's mean or what. I don't know. It's just been so weird lately. But anyway, the TLDR is the Molten Core raid happened. It's not supposed to be the climax of the guild, but I kind of think it is. And essentially, there's quite a few people that died. Big streamers, WoW people you may know, such as Annie Fuchsia. Let's see, are there any other WoW people that died? Vandy died. Yeah, but either way, basically, so every time someone dies, what do people do? They go up in the VODs of all the other people, right? The tanks, the healers are like, oh, how could they have saved them? And it's just the most like dog shit gameplay you've ever seen. And you just see like the biggest panics and like fumbles and mistakes. And of course, the first thing Dorky says when he watches these clips is, "This is how I imagine you playing when we're doing keys." And it's an idiot, but anyway, it's just like you see this stuff and it and everyone's like getting attacked. And people are like, oh, you killed this guy, you did this, and it's just like, I don't know, man. Like I've been thinking a lot about drama in the internet lately because recently I've been thinking about drama almost in a positive light about the idea of like, as long as you don't make things personal, I think drama's like fun, right? To like have some crazy thing happen, have some beef, and then to kind of like think about like if you were in his shoes, what would you do, right? Like if you were in Pirate Software's shoes, what would you do? If you were his teammate, what would you do? You're not necessarily trying to burn down the guy's career, but it's just like imaginary social crazy situations that you might never be a part of. It's not really like, oh, I'm so invested in this and I care so much about it. But the problem is there are people that are, right? And it's like it's just this crazy thing where like as a streamer or whatever, you say or do things and then you have this like rippling effect and then it ends up like reaching some crazy mentally ill person that's like sending death threats to somebody over a WoW character. And it's just like, I don't know. That's been a lot on my mind lately. I don't really have anything concrete about it, but I mean, again, I've said this every episode. This classic hardcore shit has been insane content, and if you haven't been following it, you should start looking back. I would say the biggest winner out of this all is fucking Peekaboo, man. Peekaboo is like he is like one of the best streamers ever, and he's been trapped in WoW PvP, which I'm sorry, but WoW PvP is fucking dog shit. And he is like one of the most entertaining streamers, and he like just doesn't get the viewers that he deserves because he plays that shit. And now that he's finally playing something in the public light, like dude, he's like literally a 10K Andy now. Like this guy's like growing thousands of viewers every single day. Like there's a clip of his mom. His parents are actually, it was so cute. They're like involved in the process. He'll like yell something to his mom about the game, and she'll like yell back like very clearly that she knows what's going on, and like he watches the stream, and I don't know. So shout out to Peekaboo. If you don't want to watch anybody or care about classic, at least watch Peekaboo. That wasn't really a cool thing to share, but it was just my rant about what's been on my mind lately.
We need to bring Nerf Tank TV back to Mythic Plus. That way we can have some drama surrounding Mythic Plus.
He's been playing Classic actually. I talked to him.
I saw that
a week ago. Yeah.
Yeah. We need him to come back. That way he can VOD review Dorky all the time and just flame him. That would be funny.
Oh yeah, true. We do need a little bit of drama. Maybe that's why M Plus seems so barren.
We need JP. JPC's got to come back. Man.
Yeah, JPC's gone. Nerf's gone.
What was the last drama?
Trance is gone. Well, so there's a little bit of stuff with the EU, right? Like the whole Zalia / AJ thing. There's definitely some drama there with like TGP and all that.
What else was there?
I think the only other one I can think of is the
morality of exploits has been a big thing,
Oh,
drama-wise.
Okay, but I feel like that was not very like popcorn drama.
There was the Equinox monks.
Oh, dude, that wasn't even that good a drama, man. That's how bad the drama is.
It was bad. Yeah, it was bad. There
was so bad.
Okay, the more the drama I was thinking was the Waycrest Manor. Who was there? It was in the hallway. The tank muted.
I'm going non-verbal. That was good.
Non-verbal. That was it.
Yeah.
That was the old. That's the one. That's the drama I was thinking of more.
That drama was so good.
That was a good one. Yeah. Oh god. Yeah. Yeah. I think the last one was like Equinox, which our drama sucks apparently.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh.
Final Q&A question. We have a question from Sina. He asks, I see a few issues plaguing the game at the moment, and I was wondering what the thoughts of the bench were on them. First is the current talent design is created to give everyone everything. This has created insane defensive and button bloat, and the other is health, mob and player not having kept up with the increases in damage and healing. The meta is way too far towards insta-killing packs before they kill you. This ends up leading towards Blizzard needing to overemphasize one-shots, which pigeonholes both Raid and Mythic Plus into this style of damage. Binary pass-fail mechanics and insane pace of mechanic spam is way too intense. What do you guys think about these takes? Do you think that these are two of the bigger issues that are plaguing the game currently?
I think, yes, they're hard to walk back. I think when it comes to talent design, it's hard because there's so many different things in WoW. Like, part of the idea is like, okay, just take a step away and you're not a top M+ player. You're just some guy that's playing the game, right? The idea that you can look at your talent tree and be like, this does AoE damage. This is really good for dungeons. Or like, oh, I'm solo in a delve. Let me pick these healing things, right? I think for like very casual players or like people that kind of bounce around and don't take things too seriously, the talent tree owns. Also, the talent tree owns for leveling. The problem is when it comes down to like looking at class balance at a high level and like thinking about metas and all that. Yes, it's definitely really, really problematic. And I don't really have a good answer for that. Like, I think you have to pick one or the other. I don't think the talent trees are a huge problem right now. I would say like the defensive creep is the biggest problems. And I think that like they either need to make defensives like way more punishing to get so that you can't just take them all, or realistically just remove them and thin them down from the tree. I think that's like the biggest problem with them. In terms of like insta-killing packs where they kill you, I definitely think the game is like speeding up and going faster and faster, more and more difficult, more and more mechanics every single season. Part of me says, oh, this is bad design and it's stupid and it's not good. Part of me looks back at Classic, and I've been playing Classic, and there are people that say that about, Cataclysm, They're like, Cataclysm is when the game died and all the raids were way too complicated, and it's like,
Holy.
yeah, right? But I mean, like, maybe we're just people that enjoyed the pace of the game 6 years ago, and now that the game is sped up, people who are getting into the game now are like, just get good, noob, or whatever, but we're like, this is way too fast. I don't really know about an answer to that either. I think the biggest problem is just the speed at which packs die, and I think that if the emphasis was more on like being efficient and doing good damage rather than just pure surviving, but they put so much emphasis on surviving that, it's like a lot of keys just feel like you just live and then you time them, and it's just about like doing the mechanics. And I don't know, maybe they want that. Like, maybe that's what they want it to be. I don't know. But to me, it's less fun in a way to like, as a regular M+ player.
I think the defensive design is definitely an issue. I mean, they acknowledge it's an issue, but just didn't want to do anything. So I absolutely think that's an issue. Health, I think we've talked about before. I think mobs are just dying quite quickly. But also, when mobs have health, people complain that things are dying too slowly, and it's really boring. So, like, I don't think there's any winning there.
You also want a 30-minute dungeon. You don't want a 38-minute dungeon.
Exactly. So, I think the health to damage ratio is more on the damage side, not on the health side. And that comes from the defensive bloat. But also, I agree with what Growl says, speed of the game has gone up. But in my opinion, binary pass-fail mechanics are good for the game. Bad binary pass-fail mechanics are not good for the game. That is like Farak intermission. Those are bad binary pass-fail mechanics. But I think good binary pass-fail mechanics like...
Did my tank have active mitigation up for one of 1 million tank busters?
I mean, or just like interrupt the... What was that? The only one at the top of my head is that that boss in Tazavesh, we have to kick him 3 times.
Oh, streets.
He just kills you.
The street sport boss. Yeah, the last boss.
Yeah, like kick him 3 times or you wipe is a good pass-fail mechanic because you have ages to get there, and it's not that difficult. So I think people put a negative boogeyman on binary pass-fail mechanics, but that's just because Blizzard has made really bad ones over the years.
I think when it comes to pass-fail mechanics, at least to me, man, maybe I'm, I guess I'm like playing Classic and thinking about. Also, I played Kata too, right? So I'm kind of thinking about all the different evolutions of the raid.
Classic.
Well, this is what I think, right? I think this is true though. When it comes to pass-fail mechanics, I think they need to be more simple and be able to be pre-planned. Like I think of it like, for instance, the Fyrak intermission is such a terrible example of a pass-fail mechanic, because it requires so much live decision making and like figuring out where to be in weak auras that like that's not what a pass fail. Like, okay, maybe the boss gets slightly buffed or maybe you take extra damage if you miss it, but that shouldn't be a fail mechanic where your whole raid wipes. Like a fail mechanic should be like, okay, what's coming, these are the assigned jobs, these are the people that need to do it, okay, they did it, like basically the way that you should feel, in my opinion, when you wipe to a pass fail mechanic is like, either holy shit, I just messed up, or that guy's a complete idiot. Like that's how you should feel when you die to a pass fail. Like when you die to a fire record mission, you're like, oh, he was over here and I came over here to this, and I had to dive for this orb, and this orb came over here, and this guy was slightly out of position. Like you're not like, oh, this guy's terrible, he's an idiot. Like I think pass fail mechanics should be simple enough where it's like you have an assigned job, you do your assigned job, and then okay, now you're done.
I will say
and that's kind of how it is in like older raids, I guess.
It's kind of weird too, because part of Mythic Plus, with the infinite scaling nature of the system, it actually creates pass-fail mechanics on mechanics that probably weren't supposed to be that hard.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Like the first boss of Stonevault, I think, is a great example of that. I think how the boss is intended to be designed is you go, you spawn the pillars, you blow up all 3 of them at once, and then you spawn the next 3 pillars, and then you blow up all 3 of them at once, and then the boss does an AoE. And if you have a dot on you, it kills you. However, that is, if you do it like that, you're probably wiping to the dot damage that's attached to you, because like there's a pass fail element that's attached to that, right? Where you didn't know that the fail was actually blowing up all 3 pillars at once because the scaling is a little bit too out of control.
Okay, like a good example is Cujo. I think Cujo is a perfectly fine pass-fail mechanic. And that mechanic is don't hit the box with the leap.
Yeah, like, spread out, don't hit the box. Yeah, exactly.
Hide. You gotta hide too.
Like nobody is complaining about the Cujo pass fail. Like if you blow up that, you're just a fucking idiot, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You deserve to wipe. Like you straight up deserve to wipe.
Exactly.
That is an example of a good pass mechanic, because the mechanic is it's very clear, it's very easy, and if you fuck it up, you're like, what the fuck are we doing? Like
reset the boss.
So I think that's fine, but yeah, I like bad ones are obviously gonna go bad.
I actually don't mind the first boss of Arakara either as a pass fail. I do think that it's a little bit. You could maybe argue it's a little bit too easy to feed the boss, like some of the crawlers, especially if you're not like in a super coordinated group. But I think in terms of just like general design, don't feed the boss. Do not let a crawler touch the boss. Like that is fine.
Yeah, I think at lower level keys it is. I think as you move up, that's where it becomes complicated, because like, for example, you want the boss to be close to the ads in order to be able to hit both, right? And like you're min-maxing movement.
Yeah.
So you might say that's okay. So you might be right? That might be okay. In a low-level group, the tank just bolts across the room like a fucking idiot, and you just kill the ads and lose all your damage and then run across the room to the boss, right? And then in a high-level key, like you have to think about how you strategize it. So maybe you're right, though. Maybe that is a good pass-fail mechanic.
There are some that I think are good, but yeah, like I think that's Squishy.
I definitely agree that there's a world where you're doing like certain things in a plus 18. It shouldn't, like, it's not really designed to be a pass-fail mechanic, but it just is because you're in a plus 18. mean? Like, I think that's totally fine.
I think that it happens even at even like 10 sometimes. I'm trying to think of like
well,
what
that's mainly what I'm thinking about is like the heroic raid level / like plus 10 level.
like the Skarmorak shard explosion. Like, is that really supposed to be a pass fail? Like, are we really?
Yeah,
supposed
that's
to,
true. That's a good example.
Like in a 10.
That takes so much coordination, right? Like,
yeah.
one guy presses one button that like chains or AoEs in a spot where he didn't expect it to, and then it didn't kill it, but like another guy hit it, and yeah, that's 100% a good example of like that should not just instantly wipe your entire party when you do that.
Yeah, and like I don't think it's supposed to be a pass fail that you just wipe it a dead, and you're like, well, now what?
That's a great example.
I don't know. All right. Any final thoughts on this week?
No, banger patch. I wish Squishy would have leaked it on time. I don't know why he's running late. Hopefully he learns next time.
Yo, bro, can you give us a patch date? Okay, perfect. I'm bleeping that out. All right, goodbye, everybody.
Peace.